Hello and welcome to another episode of Peripheral Vision. In last week's episode, it was a reflection on the wandering in the wilderness in which Moses led his people through the wilderness and the desert for this long process of purification. And today's talk is basically on the same topic, but from another perspective. And that also leads us to another very important book in the books of Moses, which is Deuteronomy. Now, in a lot of the readings so far have been from Numbers and from Exodus, and have been telling the story as a narrative. But the book of Deuteronomy is from Moses' perspective. He's telling the story. And these are the words that Moses spoke to all Israel beyond the Jordan in the wilderness, in the Arabah over the Soph, and this final stage in his journey, he's giving the last will and testament, if you will, about all of his purposes and what God wants for his people through Moses. And you'll notice that there's a tonal shift. There's a tonal shift in Deuteronomy. It almost has a greater wisdom behind it, but a wisdom that had to be earned. And a wisdom that had to be earned through a very difficult school. And I suspect that the difficulty of this learning process is why it's such a rare thing. Why was Moses so singular? In spite of the fact that God clearly wants all of the people to share in this prophetic spirit of Moses. And I think it begins in the beginning of the Exodus story when Moses killed the Egyptian. When Moses learned what he's capable of. And when Moses learned the consequences of a shallow fix. And that can often burn inside our souls when we've made a powerful mistake and it's had lingering consequences. It kind of makes us fearful of doing certain things. And, rightly so. And that fear is not a bad thing. It's the fear of the Lord that's the beginning of wisdom. But it also becomes a strange game where it also impedes our ultimate growth. And so the wisdom of following the Lord is kind of double. It knows the boundaries, it knows the limits of our capacities, and yet at the same time, through those limits, God will give us something greater. But maybe not in our own lifetime. And this is a mystery that goes so deep that it's very hard to describe it in almost any other piece of literature anywhere. I've been using Sherlock Holmes as a way of describing some of the mysteries of Moses, but Sherlock can only go so far. He understands, for instance, the perversities of the human heart, but not in a deep enough way. Because as we heard last week about philosophy, the search for truth, the search for goodness, he's not quite there yet. But an even more interesting detective in roughly the same time period wasn't actually a detective. He's also fictional, by the way, but he was a Roman Catholic priest written by G.K. Chesterton, actually during his Anglican phase. And the priest's name was Father Brown. And he would solve crimes, not for the purpose of condemning the guilty, but in order to give them forgiveness, the reconciliation that they need. And one of the ways in which he was so effective at deducing the mysteries or deducing the character of the criminal was because he knew that he was a criminal himself. Not one that has committed crimes, but that has almost desired them. And it's that self-knowledge, that knowledge that he is just as dark and difficult as the criminal, that not only gives him the desire to show the criminal mercy, but also the proper means of the criminal's reconciliation. And so Father Brown describes it thus: there are two ways of renouncing the devil, and the difference is perhaps the deepest chasm in modern religion. One is to have a horror of him because he is so far off, and the other to have it because he is so near. And no virtue and vice are so much divided as those two virtues. In our wandering of faith, in beginning this journey, we have this hope that we can somehow be good and show the Lord how much we honor him with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our strength. But as we discovered, sometimes our traumas or our experiences or our sadnesses can color how we see that worship. And we can very quickly and unconsciously revert to an idolatry that turns good into evil and evil into good. And the sad thing is, in order to face it, we must, in a sense, shake hands with our own evil and with our own shadow side. And I believe that it was Moses knowing that he could not trust his own motives, that he could not even trust himself, is the precise reason why he was able to be so compassionate to Miriam and to Aaron and even to Dathan, who's another figure we didn't cover, because he knows how quickly and easily he could fall into their mistake. And it's a mistake of harshness that looks like righteousness. And so as we heard last week, at the end of last week, God told Moses that he could not enter into the promised land, he could not cross the Jordan, because he struck the rock rather than speaking to it. And by striking the rock, even if the water did come out, it did not come out as God had commanded, and therefore God said to Moses, "You will not lead my people across the Jordan. Rather, that should be left to your successor, Joshua." And so part of Moses' last testament is him giving his further reflections on his lifetime of experience, and hopefully inculcating into the people of Israel that God knows their shadow side, the darkness that they're capable of. And by a strange miracle, God will still plunge into that and make it new. How exactly God does that will be kind of a mystery. Moses will constantly, in a sense, want to see what the promised land looks like, and God will say, no. And you almost get this impression that God is being cruel. But there's something to be said for the fact that Moses signed up for this. Like, he knew. And he's the one that petitioned God to show Israel clemency. And so, in a way, Moses is getting what he asked for. And Moses reminds the people, "Yet you would not go up, but rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. And you murmured in your tents and said, 'Because the Lord hated us and brought us forth out of the land of Egypt to give us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us, whither are we going up? Our brethren have made our hearts melt, saying, the people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up to heaven. And moreover, we have seen the sons of Anakim there.' Then I said to you, 'Do not be in dread or afraid of them. The Lord your God, who goes before you, will himself fight for you, just as he did for you in Egypt, before your eyes, and in the wilderness, where you have seen how the Lord God bore you as a man bears his son, in all the way that you went until you came to this place. Yet in spite of this word, you did not believe the Lord your God, who went before you in the way to seek you out of the place to pitch your tents in fire by night, to show you by which way you should go, in the cloud by day.'" So there's a lesson that must be learned. "And now, O Israel, give heed to the statutes and the ordinances which I teach you, and do them, that you may live. And go and take possession of the land which the Lord your God, your fathers, gives you. You shall not add to the word which I command you, nor take from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God which I command you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did at Baal Peor, for the Lord your God had destroyed from among you all the men who were followed by the Baal of Peor. But you who held fast to the Lord your God are all alive to this day. Behold, I have taught you statutes and ordinances as the Lord my God commanded me, and you should do them in the land which you are entering to take possession of it. Keep them and do them, for that will be your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples, who when they hear all these statutes will say, 'Surely this nation is great and wise, understanding people.' For what a great nation is there that has a God so near to it, as the Lord our God is near to us. And whenever we call upon him, and what great nation is there that has statutes and ordinances so righteous as all this law which I set before you today? Only take heed and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things which your eyes have seen, and lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your children's children, how on the day that you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, the Lord said to me, 'Gather the people to me, that I may let them hear my words, so that they may learn to fear me all the days that they live upon the earth, and that they may teach their children so.'" You can see that the commands that God gives through Moses are framed as a way of showing God's tenderness. And yet, they're received as harsh. And every parent knows this feeling, of feeling like the villain for doing good. And a lot of parents can fall into the temptation of becoming the villain over time, actually out of their fear of being the villain. They want to be well thought of. They want to be admired. They want to be adored. And that's exactly what God, strangely, doesn't seem to want. And so God himself is kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place. Because just like a parent, he can't give in to their desires, and he must confront them. And yet, by doing so, he'll be hated for it. And this is something that Moses himself had to learn, and had to live, and had to walk. And in order to withstand the accusation of not caring, there has to be an interior security, an interior wisdom that is able to hold fast and firm, knowing that everything that is humanly possible for this people and more Moses has done. And yet, on another level, it's not good enough for them. But it's also factually not enough. The reason why Moses is giving this testimony is because God said to Moses that he did not show his glory. So Moses failed, but Moses failed precisely because he loves. He could have just given up and been blameless, but it was because he chose to love fully that now he doesn't get to enjoy the full blessings. So a choice must be made. What's more important? To do the greatest good and fail? Or to succeed by hiding your talent in the napkin and burying it? And I believe that Moses chose the better part. Because there's two kinds of idols. There's an idolatrous polytheism, where you add up false gods in any sorts of number, thinking that that adds to the fullness of life. And as new dimensions of life open up, you're like, oh, we need a god of electrical outlets, or we need gods of vents. Just seeing things, by the way, as I'm walking and calling them gods. But if you know anything about the ancient world, that's what happens. They just see a bunch of stuff and then say, hey, there's a god there. There's a god here. There's a god over there, and we'll make a shrine to the vent. Oh, the Lord of Vents. But there's a different kind of false god. One that appears to be the one true God. It's an idolatrous monotheism. And that one is much more difficult to deal with. Because we can easily just assume that it's all the same. So how do you test it? How do you test it? Well, as Moses discovered, almost like a detective, you must gather evidence, be patient, and use your best judgment. but after you've made your best judgment, to still know that you could be wrong. When the Lord your God cuts off before you the nations whom you go in to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, take heed that you are not ensnared to follow them after they have been destroyed before you, and that you do not inquire about their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods, that I may also do likewise? You shall not do so to the Lord your God. For every abominable thing which the Lord hates they have done, for their gods, for they even burn their sons and their daughters in fire to their gods. Everything that I command you, you shall be careful to do. You shall not add to it or take from it. If a prophet arises among you, or a dreamer of dreams, and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder which he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, let us go after other gods which you have not known, and let us serve them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet, or to that dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your God is testing you, to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him, and keep his commandments, and obey his voice. And you shall serve him, and cleave to him. But that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has taught rebellion against the Lord your God, who has brought you out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to make you leave the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to walk. So you shall purge the evil from the midst of you. If your brother, the son of your mother, or your son, or your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your friend who is your own soul, entices you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, some of the gods of the prophets that are round about you, whether near you or far off from you, from the one at the end of the earth to the other, you shall not yield to him or listen to him, nor shall you pity him, nor shall you spare him, nor shall you conceal him. But you shall kill him. Your hand shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterwards the hands of all the people. You shall stone him to death with stones, because he sought to draw you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and out of the house of bondage. And all Israel shall hear and fear, and never again do any such wickedness as this among you. Now, that sounds a bit harsh. That sounds a bit harsh, let's admit. And when we stopped reading these things because it sounded tough, and I think with rightness, we can be rather perturbed by it, because life itself seems so precious, and that we should be very gracious with people. Then why is God commanding through Moses to put such persons to death? And again, I am not saying that you should. There's different things to face. There's different challenges in the world. Sometimes I've found that knowing what sin or what a crime deserves is the first step in forgiving it. And you need to feel the tragedy of the injustice in the depths of our heart. And if we don't know what can happen with idolatry and what a false god can justify, then we can see where the pain is. For at the very beginning of the reading, it warned us that the false gods will demand certain sacrifices of us, most notably the immolation of our own children. And you can say that literally, and you can also say it figuratively. A false god consumes your future for the sake of the present. It is a murderous act. And it's not just something that you do before a statue. It's not just something that you do in a temple. It's something that we can do in the world. When we sacrifice the environment, for instance, for the sake of simple economic growth, and justify it because of the uber importance of the economy. Or if we destroy our children at the altars of good things like education or lifestyle, in order to feel a kind of personal or subjective comfort, that can be equally destructive. And when we see it in the world, it should cause our hearts to break. It should make us realize how in-depth the problem of our world actually is. We should look at evil with anger. Because the more virtuous we get, the more we should look on evil with contempt. But here's the problem. With Moses and with Father Brown, they both know that if the law were entirely applied at every moment, all the time, they would already be dead. Moses had to run away from his murderous act and restart his life. When Father Brown is describing how he knows the heart of a murderer, is because he said, I've murdered many in my hearts many times before. Because what does our Lord Jesus say? If we say, you fool, or we slander a person, we've already committed murder in our hearts. Should we apply the law then? Are we ready to apply the law then? I dare say, probably not. And then in that situation, we can stand before the creation of a new society right at the brink of the river of establishing a new life. And right at the brink of the river say, well, here we are. Right at the brink of the river Jordan, to behold the land that the Lord God has been giving to our ancestors. And we're not ready. The journey continues. Because, as the Lord constantly reminds us, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And if we want to play the role of judge, jury, and executioner, we are then assuming for ourselves the mantle of God and have turned ourselves into that worst kind of idol, the one that simply presumes that one's own personal opinions, one's own personal thoughts are like the living God. And so Moses, realizing that he alone in Israel, in a sense, possesses this wisdom born of gentleness, and yet, that he himself is yet not gentle enough to live it, that a new fulfillment must happen. Because anything that God starts to set in motion, God will complete. So if God reveals to Moses a problem that he experiences on the brink of the River Jordan, a problem that God is revealing through Moses' life, a new prophet must bring to fulfillment Moses' mission. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you. From your brethren, him you shall heed. Just as you have desired of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly, when you said, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, or see this great fire any more, lest I die. And the Lord said to me, they have rightly said all that they have spoken. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brethren, and I will put my words into his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And whoever will not give heed to my words, which he shall speak in my name, I myself will require of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that same prophet shall die. And if you say in your heart, how may we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? When the prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the word does not come to pass or come true, that is a word which the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously, and you need not be afraid of him. That's an important passage, because God promises to Israel a new prophet like Moses, who will speak God's word. And importantly, the art of discerning the identity of that prophet is not to be taken for granted. It's very, very difficult. So you watch and wait and see if what that prophet speaks comes to pass. Does he have that rounded, full wisdom? Does he understand not only the rigor of God's law and of its challenges, but does he also understand the human heart in such a way so as to be truly merciful to us, so as to not undermine the very purpose for which God created us, that mercy that he wanted to show us, that Moses himself understood. Remember, when God offered to Moses a kingdom in his own person, Moses wanted mercy for the people. It's just that over time, he did not have the strength to be gentle. He lost heart. So this new prophet must speak with power and with kindness. And his words will also have to be effective in themselves, that they bring about and enact the very thing that they signify. That if they were to say, be healed, then they will be healed. That the words themselves have power. Now, God gave that power to Moses, and therein lies a bit of a difference. Moses must be bestowed this power because it does not come from himself. He's almost playing a role. So the new prophet, somehow and in some way, must be the very mercy he has come to proclaim. It's this strange middle point that should allow us to have a certain sympathy with Israel. Like Moses, they knew that they were meant to be a light to the nations, but a tremendous temptation of the idolatrous monotheism is an empty universalism. I know it's fancy words, but what it means is, and I'm pretty sure we've encountered this in parishes and in our life in general, the person who's found their truth and demands that everybody else should fall into line. You know? And oftentimes it's over really small things. You know, it's like, I don't like booze, and then the booze drinking people, they're just evil. It's like, oh, okay. Well, you can't be a Christian and think like that because, you know, wedding at Cana and such. Oh, well, you know, the only people that are truly with God are the ones that dress a certain way. It's like, oh, okay. So does that mean that we as Christians should be, you know, wearing robes or something? I don't want to wear robes. I'm talking like first century Roman robes or those things that Jesus would have worn in the first century. Because that's kind of superficial on the outside. It's like, oh, well, we need a certain haircut if we're Christians. It's like, maybe not. But that kind of imposed universality is a lot easier than knowing the heart. So while I think it's shallow to impose a universal government or a universal language or a universal type of dress or anything like that as, you know, let's just say not quite becoming of the one true God, it is pretty tempting. It is pretty tempting to give that desire for unity an attempt at uniformity. And this is a deep and terrifying temptation. And the more we grow, I believe, the more we know it's there. And sometimes the only way we can really experience it is when we feel stuck between a rock and a hard place. When we're being badgered by somebody into speaking words that we ought not to speak, while trying to avoid lying. When we are fearful for our security and we have to resist preemptive striking or gossip. When we're a small group of a few thousand families struggling against some of the greatest empires that the world has ever seen. And we want peace. We want security. We want a home. And we're tired of wandering through a wilderness. But we know the price that may have to be paid. And yet we're not strong enough, courageous enough, wise enough, humble enough to make that giant step, to follow the pillar of fire to a seemingly small river that borders the land of your ancestors. And so again, we're posed with a very terrifying question. Do I have the strength to be gentle? Or am I reduced to waging war? Moses then lays it out before the people and says, you are going to go into the land of Canaan, and you're going to have to kill everyone. Wait, what? Yeah, he says it. On a number of occasions, actually. And I hope you're disturbed by that. I still am. Again, why should that happen? Well, Moses has learned something through this long wandering. That his people are too weak. They didn't even last 50 days. Too weak in their temptation towards worshiping false gods. The false gods will demand sacrifices. People out of fear will make those sacrifices. And the cycle will continue. And Israel will have one of two fates. One's worse than the other. One fate is going all the way back into Egypt, becoming slaves again. Or, worse yet, they become Egypt. And Moses has to think, oh, what am I going to do about this? I can't prevent either from happening. And so he does something that we actually do unconsciously, but don't know that we're doing it. He allows for the evil that he knows is evil because they're incapable of doing the good. And he knows that about himself. He knows that about himself. Moses dies, knowing that for all that he has succeeded in doing, he still kind of failed. The only way to protect his people from false idols is to remove any and all vestiges of their past. And even then, as the centuries will unfold, even that won't actually fix the problem. But that remains to be seen. In fact, it has to be seen. Sometimes, honestly, we can be told that we will do evil. We will be told that we are not righteous. And we might not believe it and need to see it for ourselves. And so God tells Moses how it's going to go down. And the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, the days approach when you must die. Call Joshua and present yourselves in the tent of meeting, that I may commission him." And Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves in the tent of meeting. And the Lord appeared in the tent in a pillar of cloud. And the pillar of cloud stood by the door of the tent. And the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, you are about to sleep with your fathers. Then this people will rise and play the harlot after the strange gods of the land, where they go to be among them. And they will forsake me and break my covenant, which I have made with them. Then my anger will be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them and hide my face from them, and they will be devoured, and many evils and troubles will come upon them, so that they will say in that day, 'Have not these evils come upon us, because our God is not among us?' And I will surely hide my face in that day on account of all the evil which they have done, because they have turned to other gods. Now therefore write this song, and teach it to the people of Israel. Put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the people of Israel. For when I have brought them into the land flowing with milk and honey, which I swore to give their fathers, and they have eaten and are full and have grown fat, they will turn to other gods and serve them, and despise me, and break my covenant. And when many evils and troubles have come upon them, this song shall confront them as a witness, for it will live unforgotten in the mouths of their descendants. For I know the purposes which they are already forming, before I have brought them into the land that I swore to give." So Moses wrote this song the same day and taught it to the people of Israel. And the Lord commissioned Joshua the son of Nun and said, "Be strong and of good courage, for you shall bring the children of Israel into the land which I swore to give them. I will be with you." God's playing a very delicate game. A game that neither Moses nor I, nor many people I've ever met, are strong enough to play. First of all, because lifespans are too short. If the sins of the fathers go down for 3 generations, it's kind of hard to be able to do it. But it comes down to this. Told you so. Remember the very beginning of the story? Don't eat the fruit. Don't eat the fruit. Why not, Lord? Why not? Because you'll die. Really? Are you sure? Yep. Don't do it. You'll die. Are you sure he said that? I'm trying to do my little serpent walk here. Are you sure he said that? Well, I think so. All right. I'm going to try it. Hey, I'm dying. How did this happen? Kind of told you so. Oh, right. Okay. Remember the words of a prophet coming to pass? So now we're stuck in a funny little game where our failures and our mistakes are, in a sense, the means by which we learn humility. Which is why, as we approach the Easter season, we're reminded of very peculiar words given to us in the Exultet. O happy fault, O necessary sin of Adam, that gained for us so great a Redeemer. How beautiful are those words. Now, we might say, well, God, you're so cruel. Why did we have to go through so much pain to learn this lesson? Be careful what you ask for from God, because being outside of time and space and all, he can anticipate every single one of your rebuttals. And we're reminded of the one person in history who simply took God at his word. And this person is hard to find, partly because they weren't tempted by the world. Well, they were tempted, but they paid attention to Moses. They paid attention to the prophets. She taught us how to live in faith and to do whatever her Son tells us. I found a lot of good in complaining to God. Because again, to reiterate, that you'll be wrong. You can pretty much take it as a maxim. You will be wrong. But that's kind of not the point. To go down deep inside your own heart and to listen to your own complaints and to find out what's really going on there. And to ask ourselves, what am I actually asking God to do? To make me good? To love goodness? To live a long life, prosperous and happy in the land which the Lord my God is giving me? Well, he offered me that. And I rejected it. Well, why did I reject it? Because I didn't trust him. And why did I not trust him? Because I was wearied from my service in Egypt. And I gave myself to false idols. And I know that death is certainly the punishment many times over that should have been meted out to a murderer and a scoundrel like myself. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God. There is a priest that was there to forgive my sins and to receive me into the church and then to give me an opportunity of sharing in that ministry. Because once you learn about your own sins, then you can be far more gentle with the sins of others. But only a true high priest, while being without sin himself, can be compassionate to the wayward and the sinful himself. To be a prophet like Moses, who knows the heart of God, who comes from the heart of God himself, and who is able to not simply cross the river Jordan, but to enter into it, to part it, and to give us a new home. See you next time.